Hello, this is Derek Hansen for StrengthPowerSpeed.com, and this is our 16th episode of our Performance Concepts Chat. And before I get into what we're talking about today and who we're talking to, I want to give a bit of a background on what's happened the last couple of weeks. I'm just coming off a conference in Toronto that was held by Daniel Noble at Hill Performance. Had a great time there. And again, like a lot of these conferences, it just gives me an opportunity to connect with people that may have seen some of my material, my articles, the podcast online, and actually getting to meet with people and you know, get a sense of where they're coming from and what they're dealing with and the specific questions they have is pretty valuable. And I think that's the best part of hitting the road, and also spending time with not just the people presenting, the other people presenting, but the people that are hosting the conference, because obviously you have to be pretty passionate to put yourself out there. And, it's not just money, it's your time, it's your effort, it's your sweat. And obviously you're taking a risk too when you will put on a big event and you're flying people in. So special thanks to Daniel Noble for doing that at Hill Performance. And also thanks to the presenters, Brett Bartholomew, makes a nice t-shirt. Ron McKeefrey, who great guy, love spending time with him and the work he's doing with the Play Summits. Also had Matt Jordan on hand, and I've known Matt for a while, done some work with Canadian speed skating in the past, had some success. So great guys to bounce things off of and just compare notes, but also interface on a level with just the regular practitioners, and just learning. I think it was good. And then the previous week I was in New York, and a little different experience, bigger scale, two-day conference, and got to spend time with some people that, I've learned from over the last 10, 15 years, including Rob Panarello, who put all of this time into organizing and setting this up, and he wanted to bring all these people together, all these people that are his friends that have influenced him. So Al Vermeil, Al Miller, Johnny Parker, Donald Chu, and Rob presented as well, and they kind of threw me in there just to kind of bring the average age down. I think that was about it, but I was honored to be just involved in the same room. I had a few things to say, but kind of paled in comparison to these guys who have, when you combine it, 100 years plus of experience. And so, and again, just meeting with people. A lot of people came from a distance, not just in the New York area, but from further out. And some people I've seen before, which is great to hang out and reconnect, but also just meeting new people. It's awesome. So, which leads me into this episode, and it's with somebody that I had a chance to meet a number of years ago, and he worked with me, and his name's Brendan Murphy, originally from Ireland, but now working with Canadian Sport Institute in Ontario, and specifically working with track cycling, which is always fascinating for me when you have somebody working in strength and conditioning for a physiological based sport. So it's just pure input and output. Obviously there's technical and tactical issues, kind of like track and field and swimming, but whatever you do as a strength and conditioning coach, you see a result, you see a placing, you see a time, you get to watch the workouts and kind of work back and forth. So we're going to talk to Brendan a bit about his background, and particularly the influences of track and field and how it's helped him to have a perspective and an approach that seems to work very well in the sport of track cycling. So great time, and we recorded this in the car because I was doing a presentation for the staff at the Canadian Sport Institute out there, and so I thought, okay, let's make use of our time. Hopefully it it's not too noisy. We mic'd him up and stuff, and you can see the video if you're just listening to the podcast. Great, the audio is pretty good, but yeah, I'm trying to be as efficient as possible. So I hope you enjoy this podcast with Brendan Murphy.
Rolling east.
Rolling east on the 401. This is the best way to make up for being stuck in traffic. Okay, Brendan, what I want you to do is give me a background on, how you started as an athlete, what you did educationally, and then give us some background on your experience in the sports performance realm.
Started off with a mixture of Gaelic football and track and field, and then specialized in track and field around mid-teens, jumps and sprints, and then finished my career as a 400 meter hurdler. Nothing spectacular.
Can we go back a bit, and could you explain what Gaelic football is?
Oh yeah, Gaelic football, it's like a hybrid between rugby and soccer, except it's older than both sports. And it's essentially a round ball, kick it over the post for a point, and you score a goal, you get 3 points, 15 players each side, semi-contact. It's probably the biggest sport in Ireland.
So it's rougher than soccer, but maybe not quite as physical as rugby.
Yeah, exactly. So the tackles in rugby aren't allowed in Gaelic football.
Okay.
But it's pretty popular in Ireland, and that's where most kids go into first, is Gaelic football or soccer.
Okay.
And then if they don't make it in that, then they can, kind of like how hockey is in Canada, then they can try something else.
Okay.
So that's pretty much what I did. I did track and field then, 400 meter hurdles. Was studying at the same time, kind of thinking a lot about training, wanting to learn more about my own body and how to train it. And I didn't have a coach until I was 18, so I kind of just worked off what I knew from a young age. Trained in a grass pitch, and then I moved with my coach when I was 18, and I started university in Belfast. And then progressed from there as a 400 meter athlete, and he pushed me up towards 400 meter hurdles. In hindsight, it probably wasn't the best idea. I could have, my time could have been better spent developing speed qualities instead of trying to just do longer stuff in medium intensity, which we know it doesn't work for a long period of time. So ultimately I wasn't quick enough, but I wouldn't say that was, I fulfilled my genetic potential in speed. I just didn't do enough speed work to get quick enough.
Okay.
So I ended on the hurdles. I did like the event. It was pretty tough on the body. Got a lot of hip pain, a lot of lower back pain.
Did you do the short hurdles, like the 110s?
No, I did when I was mid-teens. I dabbled a little bit in multi-events, so a little bit of decathlon, except I couldn't pole vault. So that ruled out a future in decathlon. But I was a pretty good all-rounder. I could throw a javelin, I could throw a discus pretty far, decent shot put, pretty good jumper. Like I was jumping mid-sixes at 15 or 16 for long jump, and 195 for high jump at around the same age as well. So I was pretty decent jumper, yeah. But I always wanted to try the sprints. But you need to sprint if you want to be fast. So I just didn't do enough of that. And
it's amazing how intuitive that seems, but how people don't do it.
Yeah. So I wouldn't say a lot of regrets, but certainly hindsight's a wonderful thing when you realize that there's a better way to do things than what you did, and you do what you can in the time because you don't know any better, and then you entrust someone. Not that he was a bad coach by any stretch. He was a really good coach. Just like he wasn't a full-time coach. Like he had a job. He just he had a couple of guys that went to the Olympics in Sydney, so he had a reputation. But yeah, I wouldn't say that it was overtraining. I would say it was just too much of the medium, not enough of the top end stuff. If I could go back and do it all over again, and I knew better, then I would spend a lot more time in the 95 plus percentage instead of the 70 to 83%, which is where I spent most of my time. So, so I wanted to understand. I always had a curiosity and trying to understand how I can be better and understand the mechanisms. So I studied sports science and specialized in exercise physiology for my undergrad, and finished that at the University of Central Lancashire in Preston. And then from there, I took a year out to try going full time. So I had 1 year to try to see what I could do. Made like top 15 in the UK.
Nice.
For the hurdles, for the 4 hurdles. And then ran the Olympic trials. Had the world champion at the time on the outside of me.
Wow.
What was his name? He's not around anymore. But I tried to chase him down, and with the 400 meter hurdles, you've got your stride pattern. Mine was 15s all the way around between the hurdles, apart from blocks to the first hurdle, which was about 21, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So I chased him down, and I did about 13 over the first 100. So from hurdle 1 to hurdle 2, I did 13 strides, so I was overstriding, and then jumped about maybe 2.5, 3 meters out from the second hurdle and kind of overstrided it and landed kind of awkwardly and jarred my back. Finished the race, and I think that was the second last race I ever did. I had to get carried off the track because I did something to my back, but it was pretty acute. And then the next week I did a British League. I competed for Liverpool Harriers. I think they were Liverpool SC now, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And did a British League the following week, and that's kind of like a points league, so it's just do everything. So that day I did a 400 meter hurdles, a 400 meters, a 200 meters, and then they needed somebody for 4x1 because one of their sprinters got injured. So I did the 4x1 and tore my quad on the back stretch.
Ouch.
But had to finish it because we needed the points.
Yeah.
So that was my last race that I ever did. So I have thought about going back and trying to like lower my 100 time because
you're a glutton for punishment?
Yeah, exactly. So not going back full time, but just dabbling in it, trying to do some 60s here and there just to keep it interesting.
Yep.
A couple of hundreds.
How old are you now?
31 next month.
There's still hope.
There's still hope to run. I've never broke 11 seconds for 100.
Uh-huh.
So if I could break 11 seconds, that would be pretty nice. But officially, I've never broke 11 seconds. I didn't do a lot of hundreds during my career, so I would like to. That's always been a goal to do that. I don't think I'll do it this year, based on some times I've posted in just training. But if I get the time, maybe I'll give it a shot again. It's the only thing that I feel is outstanding. I've tried to dabble a little bit again in rugby and a couple other sports here and there, but they catch my interest for about a month, and then I always go back to the same thing. So
yeah. No, it's one of the regrets that we all have, that we didn't run faster because we didn't train properly.
Yeah.
And if we could do it all over again, I'm sure it would be different. But then what the question I always ask is, if I was better as an athlete, would I be as determined as a coach now? Like, did you have to fail?
Possibly not. Like, I think that I was always striving for for a way to better myself and find out that information for myself, so I had more control over my own training. And I think if I had been just handed all this information, just like, oh yeah,
here's the secret.
Here's the manual,
the plan.
and go ahead, and it worked, I probably wouldn't have had that inkling to investigate more for myself and try to find out a bit more for myself. So maybe a blessing in disguise, that I've ended up where I am as a result of being a relatively mediocre athlete.
So obviously the track and field has heavily influenced your desire and your thought process in the physical preparation, strength and conditioning field.
Yep.
So what did you get into first in terms of working with athletes?
Track and field was pretty much my go-to whenever I finished up. I had an acquaintance back home who was starting up a club and had some youth athletes. I actually was completing a master's at the time, not directly in strength and conditioning. It was more of a research-based master's in exercise science. And he asked me if I would come down and help out with a little bit of coaching and stuff. So I came down. There was a couple of talented young kids, boys and girls, around age 13, 14. I had coached track and field for athletics in their summer schemes and stuff like that. I agreed, so I came and I started to really enjoy it, started to get good results with some of the kids, learned from some of the mistakes that I made. I didn't necessarily know how to apply everything, but I kind of worked with some stuff, and if it didn't work, I threw it out, and if it did work, I kept it in. Then we introduced some of the more talented kids into the gym just to try to get up to speed with that. So I wouldn't say we went heavy in the gym. We just did a lot of technical stuff with the barbell, just learned them how to squat properly. When they got a little bit stronger, taught them Olympic lifts. And general conditioning, that was the way the gym was, which is body weight stuff. And then on the track, again, I tried to incorporate more 10s, 20s, 30s, 40s.
Yep.
There wasn't any reason for that other than that I figured if they can run fast for those distances, it'll carry over. At this point, I wasn't familiar with any of Charlie's work or yourself or any of the high-low concept stuff. I just wanted to try stuff that I had never tried in my career.
You just gravitated toward it naturally.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
Cool.
I would still say we did some medium stuff, but we definitely did sessions that I did as an athlete because it's what I knew, and coaches always say, well, that's what I did, but it's not necessarily the best thing to do. And I think if you're a critical thinker or you have that skill, that you can see pretty quickly that something's not working.
Yeah.
Or if you're seeing the athlete on a regular basis, which I was, because I was seeing them at the track 3-4 nights a week, and I was seeing them 1 or 2 nights a week in the gym, you can start to see things aren't quite the way they should be after some of those types of sessions. So we had success with a couple of those kids, like a couple of them won age group national championships. We had one kid in particular who she was a female at 15. She was an 800-meter athlete. At 15, she ran 2:07 or something like that. Then the year later, she qualified for the European Junior Championships, which was an under-18 event at 16, and she ran 2:03, which finished her 4th in the Europeans. And I think that put her top 10 in the world. So I think that at that point it was a bit of an indication, okay, something's working here. And that summer that she went to the Europeans, myself and my girlfriend decided that we were going to move to Canada. So said, good luck to everybody, and we headed to Vancouver then.
Yeah.
Other stuff I had done prior to that too. I had worked for the so in Gaelic football, just to go back a bit, you have the elite is the county. So there's 32 counties in Ireland, so you've got 32 teams, and if you're from the county, you play for your county. There's no trades or drafting or anything like that. So I worked as the strength and conditioning coach for the county.
Okay.
So I looked after under-18s, Gaelic footballers and hurlers, some senior players. So I did that for about almost 18 months. And prior to that, I had been working on the side for some club teams as well, some upper level club teams. But my main interest was working with the track and field athletes. And I think that's where I learned the most, was just having that freedom. Because when you're working for a team, you don't have the freedom to do what you want. You can't express.
No,
you have to try to fit with what the coach is doing.
The mercy of somebody else. Yeah.
So it was nice to start off in something that was totally voluntary, and have total control, and actually start to see the fruits of your labor pretty quickly.
Yeah.
So that's what I would probably recommend to anybody who's thinking of getting into it, or even wants a learning experience. You can't. There's no better. learning experience than actually just taking an athlete that you have control over and trying to apply some stuff to them and see what happens.
It's the best teaching tool, and if it has to be, it could be a weightlifter, it could be a swimmer, it could be a cyclist, it could be a track athlete, but you're right, taking control over the entire, even the technical stuff, right? And just, it's a bit of trial and error too, which is I think is one of the the most efficient ways to learn.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think there's a lot of. I'd rather have a good track coach in charge of strength and conditioning than an average strength coach in most cases.
Yeah, I mean, I think the skill that it gave me too is that, you can see where the real value is, and what you're trying to program.
Because you
instead of just being stuck in the weight room all the time and thinking that if your athlete squats 3 times body weight, that's all automatically going to qualify them for an elite performance, when we know very well that most of the time that is not the case, and the amount of time that you need to invest into to squat that type of relative load is so huge that it just takes away and drains from everything else, and you rarely ever get the performance that you desire by chasing that path. So
you spent some time in Vancouver. We don't have to talk a lot about that. We know what went down.
Yeah.
But then you moved out to Toronto area, where we are now, with all this lovely weather and great traffic.
Yeah.
And you started working with high performance cyclists, track cyclists.
Yeah.
Can you talk a bit about the initial stages of that? You got here, what your thoughts going into it. Okay, I'm working with cyclists, it's more like track and field, and then how everything turned out so far.
Yeah, I don't know what my expectations were when I got here. I mean, I had an interest in track cycling. I thought about trying to make a switch. At one point, I think there was a guy back at home who was involved somehow with track cycling at a development level. It was in road cycling, certainly still involved in that, but he had suggested it, and it was kind of like, yeah, sure, but I don't have a bike, and there's no velodrome, and I don't know anything about this. I'm just doing what I'm doing. Yeah. So, it's one of the events. I think it's still one of the marquee events at the Olympics. It's everybody waits for the athletics, but I think you have the swimming, then you have the track cycling, and then you have the athletics in that order. And I think that's the 3 main for me that I would watch in Olympics. That's the pinnacle for those sports, and you always see the best performances in those sports, and I think that's where the most drama is. So I had an interest in it. I read a little bit about it, obviously prior to getting the job, and trying to research some stuff about the sport. I honestly didn't really know what to expect or what I was getting into, but I got here in January 2015. They just had a brand new velodrome that had just been built, not opened yet. We had a gym space, but we didn't have a gym. We had athletes, but they weren't on site or in the area.
Okay.
So for the first couple of weeks, the month or two, we were basically just trying to get equipment together, set out the design of the gym, meet with the coaches, liaise with the coaches a little bit, figure out a little bit what the sport was about and what were the requirements. I got a really good feeling for the coaches on first impressions, and I've dealt with some coaches, and a lot of the things that they were saying were ticking the boxes. The main coach that it was made clear that I'd be working with would be the sprint coach. He wanted someone with that more speed power development background. He really liked that I had a pretty deep involvement in track and field and had some success there as a coach as well.
Great.
He wanted me to try to apply some of those philosophies to his guys, because again, he had seen a lot of guys that just go in and lift lots of weight and it doesn't transfer into the pedals. So we had some really good discussions from the off, and then some of the athletes started to slowly filter in. I think my first meeting was kind of like a testing weekend where we just brought them in, got them familiarized on some of the philosophies that we were trying to bring to the program and some of the key exercises that we'll be using, especially in the gym. And that was a mixture of like some athletes who were kind of already cycling and were doing okay, and the veterans who had been doing it and living in LA and training in LA for the last 5-6 years or whatever.
In Los Angeles?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Because Toronto and LA are the only two indoor velodromes in North America.
Okay.
So they had been living and training in LA as Canadian athletes. And they had been like between coaches or getting coached by either somebody from Cycling Canada or somebody from the local area down there. And then I would say that it was a pretty good first meeting with everybody. Like the more novice athletes were the buy-in was there straight away. They had never had somebody give them instruction in the weight room before, or even on the track necessarily. So they had two coaches that were looking after their best interests. The more veteran athletes were a little bit more difficult to get the buy-in from because they had more or less seen it all before. They maybe had been burned by the system or by a couple of coaches. So even to this day, there's still a fight to buy into some ways of thinking, even with some of the success that we've had.
Yep.
So that year was a Pan Am Games. So the velodrome opened in January 2015. We had the Pan Am Games in July. I'd say I had a pretty good start with all the programs. Had a pretty good run. The gym was working pretty well, consistent for most programs. And then at Pan Am Games, we had a gold in women's team pursuit. We had a bronze in men's team pursuit. We had 2 sprint female gold medals and a bronze, I think. And then in the men's, we had 2 golds and a bronze or silver. So we had pretty successful Pan Am Games. So it was kind of like a showcase for the program. It was it was 6 months of work we had put in, and it was, for some of these athletes, it was the first time they'd ever got on a Pan Am podium, never mind
fabulous.
win a gold medal.
Yeah.
So that was pretty cool to be a part of that and to have that success relatively quickly. And I think that's a testament to the people who are in place, that everything was consistent for those 6 months, and everything seemed to mesh and gel and work well together, and we had that success. And then obviously that was the test run before the Olympics. So the following year then, tried to build a little bit off that, tried some new things. Some things worked, some things didn't. And it's not the best time to be necessarily, I wouldn't say anything that we tried was radical. It wasn't, we were just trying some modifications, some exercises, and trying some more electric type work and on the track. So it wasn't like we completely overhauled the program after the Pan Am Games. We just tried to build on what we had done, and in hindsight that was a good thing to do because the athletes were progressing. So I think as the athletes are progressing, your programming progresses, and hopefully everything works in tandem.
Yep.
I think if some of the things that I'm doing now with the athletes wouldn't have worked as well back then because they weren't ready for it. They weren't at that stage of development. So in hindsight, what I was doing then was probably the right thing to do, and hopefully that'll be the same in a year down the line. I'll look back and say that this was the right thing to do now. So the Olympics, then we had for the sprint events, we had our 2 women qualify for everything. So that was women's team sprint, Kieran, and match sprint, and then we had one of our guys qualify, and he only qualified for Kieran because he had a huge crash and missed out on points for some of the other events. We didn't have a men's team sprint at this point, and everything was kind of focused on these 3 athletes.
Okay.
And then our women's team sprint qualified, women's team pursuit qualified. They're top of the rankings in the world stage at that point, the Pan Am champions. They won the World Cup overall and 3rd at the World Championships, but the British are always coming on strong. They don't care about anything else but the Olympics, and the Americans were doing pretty well, and the Aussies are always a threat. So there was quite a few teams in the works for the challenge for that medal for the women's team pursuit, but they managed to get 3rd in the women's team pursuit. So that was our only medal at the Olympics. And then the sprint, we had subpar performances due to, I would say, psychological issues. I would say clinical psychological issues, but performance anxiety issues across the sprint program.
Okay.
So physically, the athletes were in better shape than they were before Pan Am Games, but the Olympics is a totally different animal.
Yeah. Had they been to previous Olympics, or was this kind of the first time?
One athlete had been.
Okay.
And surprisingly, that athlete had probably the largest performance anxiety issues. So, yeah, the Olympics, from my perspective, I wasn't there. I was back at home in Ireland watching it, and it was kind of hard to watch with the success of other teams and how hard we had worked.
Uh-huh.
And it didn't quite pay off on the day.
So you go through the Olympics, you've been involved with the program not that long, quite honestly. So
No.
What do you do after the Olympics? What is the review process, the debrief?
Yeah.
How do you move forward?
Yeah, so there was a pretty large debrief and review. There wasn't really a huge expectation on the sprint program, and I would say the program at large, because there was a lot of new coaches for pretty much all of the disciplines, and it's a new velodrome, and the understanding from the people at the top was that this is not going to happen in 2 years.
That's good.
The focus has always been on Tokyo 2020.
Yep.
So that was good to have that, to take that time pressure off, and it gave us a chance to really evaluate after Rio without having to worry if we were going to still be in a job. A lot of that worry's probably always there in sport, but I think to get some of our athletes to show up on the starting line in Rio, in terms of the performances they needed to make to qualify, was seen as an achievement for some of them.
That's good.
So there were small victories to be had, even though it wasn't a great Olympics as a team. So since then, we reviewed some of the programming, we talked about some of the stuff. I wouldn't say we've again had a radical overhaul. I think we've kept in what works, but we have more room now in these early years out from the Olympics to maybe look at some things and in a different perspective, try some new things, keep it fresh for some of the athletes, because both myself and Aaron, the sprint coach, are big believers in consistency and keeping the things that work in and not changing things up just because something didn't quite go to plan, or we didn't win a medal or whatever, and I think that's becoming apparent across all the programs. There was a very quick tendency to throw some things out. If athletes were really tired, we would start, some of the programs would start to peel layers off, like take out the gym or take out some of the stuff that had been consistent and actually was contributing to performance or preventing injury, and sacrificing that, and then still not having the performance even though you sacrificed it, right? But I think there's definitely more consistency in the programming across all the programs right now. So since the Olympics, my position has changed. I've moved into only working with the sprint and specializing with the sprint program, and have an assistant who's working with the endurance programs, which I'm overseeing. But in terms of hands-on and administrative work, the load is a lot less than it is with the sprint program. So before Rio, I was dedicating still probably 60-70% of my time to working with the sprinters and 30-40% to working with the other programs, because they're not at the velodrome every day. They're there for camps, whereas the sprinters are there every day. So it gives me more time to really evaluate where we're at, evaluate where I'm at, evaluate some of the stuff that I'm doing a bit more closely, and making sure that it's actually resulting in performance.
And what are some of the big, people like to say, what are the big rocks, as opposed to the little rocks, but what are some of the big things that you are focusing on, say, for the next year, in terms of maybe things you're going to keep in, things that you're looking at to maybe enhance the program?
Yeah, I've always tried to look at things from an individual needs perspective, and like the program as a whole, it's everybody's on the same path. Everybody wants to get faster, and the sessions don't really vary that much in terms of the underlying philosophy. But as I said, some of the workouts that some people are capable of handling, others aren't. So I try to take an individualized approach to that, and like I try to look at things in terms of a pyramid, and the bottom layer is strength, and I've had time to evaluate the role that actually just raw strength has, and there does appear to be a relationship between leg strength and pedaling power, which is not really a surprise, but these things are a lot more grey in track and field. Like, you have guys that can only squat maybe 70 or 80 kilos but run a sub 10 second 100 meters.
Yeah.
And then you've got guys in the NFL that can squat 600 pounds and run a 4.4 40, right? So
well, I think in track, and I don't know what the role is in cycling, if any, but obviously the elastic response is huge.
Yeah.
And so if you have the elastic response, I assume you can still go after big numbers in the gym and maybe not have a deleterious effect.
Yes.
But
yeah, and I would say that is the main difference between track cycling and those more land-based sports, whether it's track and field and you work all your way back down the spectrum to team sports. And but I am a firm believer that there is an elastic component to track cycling, and not as much as track and field, but that stretch shortening cycle does play a role, especially in the sprint events. And with everything, I think there's a point of diminishing returns. So I try to get a base level of strength with some of the more novice athletes that are coming into the sprint program that are still part of the national team, but I'm just trying to get them a little bit stronger, trying to build a little bit of capacity into them so it can withstand more of the higher intensity efforts.
Have you done any land-based sprinting with these athletes?
I haven't. It's something I thought about initially, and I come back to it. There is one or two athletes that probably could do it, as they have a sprinting background.
Okay, so they have some skill.
Yeah, there's like one or two of the athletes that have not done anything in their life but cycling, so the return I wouldn't see being as great, because if their technical proficiency is
just like Olympic
really
lifting,
poor, then your return on the investment in that is going to be
good point.
Yeah, and obviously there's the risk of injury there, because they're constantly in hip flexion. So
that's true.
Any rapid hip extension can maybe not end well. So there is some merit, I think, to it with some of the athletes, and if they are all proficient sprinters and their technique was flawless, I would be like, yeah, let's try this. And I really think that it could transfer very, very well, because we see some of these athletes with a speed power background, and even now, like, one of our most successful athletes is a bobsleigh track and field athlete. So some of the qualities that she has and possesses are not naturally in the cycling specific athletes. So that's led me to it's kind of reinforced my thinking that there is a big stretch shortening cycle component to it, and just being able to turn over, even though it seems like a concentric only action, but there is dorsiflexion at the ankle, especially when you're turning over and at the start of the upstroke, and there has to be some energy stored there and returned from the tendon into the muscle.
Sure.
So I would say, like, my philosophy from day one and the exercise that we've chosen hasn't really changed. I've always been like, in a general prep and into a little bit of specific prep, the focus is on strength, and we always keep a little bit of power work in there. So whether it's concentric only jumps or elastic jumps and medicine ball throws, and then just microdosing those in with some of the strength stuff before we do that, and then when we're getting into more of the competition prep, and we'll do more of the the higher intensity jumps.
Okay.
And try to really get the athletes to focus on turning over on the depth jumps or on the reactive jumps, and then just keeping everything else, relatively low, like not too heavy on the squat in terms of volume. I like to keep the intensity pretty high on the squat, so I always keep it above 80%.
Okay.
And yeah, just the Olympic lifts have always been in there, so whether it's snatch or power clean, we'll put that in there too. I actually use different modes of the Olympic lifts going into the competitive prep too, so I like to think of everything, and I think I got this from you. I think I asked you about like speed strength as a quality and training barbell speed, and I think it was a light bulb moment in your office one day where it's like, yeah, when we're going into competitive prep, maybe we should try doing some stuff at 30% 1RM, like speed squats or whatever. And well, how quick can you move a bar even with 30% 1RM? And it's still only 1 point something meters per second, like 1.4, 1.5.
Yep.
What, you're going to push that up by 0.2 meters a second in a month?
Yeah.
And it's not going to translate to anything, right? There's things that you can do where you move a lot quicker, whether it's throws, jumps, and obviously sprints. So those have a bigger influence on force development and peak dynamic forces than anything else that you can do in the weight room, in my eyes. So that's always been the underlying to that. So I always want the athletes. I see like the real gold in terms of what I can do being in this speed power end of things. Like the strength is fine. It's easy. It's relatively easy to build strength. I think it's much more difficult to build speed and power.
I agree.
And also to maintain it.
I agree. And so my last question, because we have an appointment coming up and we're sitting in a parking lot and it looks pretty odd, but I'm gonna hopefully talk to Keenan Robinson, who does all the dryland training for USA Swimming now and work with Michael Phelps. And one of the questions I'm going to ask him, same for you, is how much influence do you have with what happens on the track, or in his case in the pool? Like, are you strictly just off the track and just providing input, or do you say to the coach, like, hey, this is what I've seen in the weight room, here are some suggestions I think that might influence what you do on the track?
Yeah, as I said, like I had a pretty good relationship with a sprint coach from the off, and I would say that our programming for on track and in the gym is as collaborative as it can be. At the start of every cycle, we'll sit down, we'll go through, he'll talk through what he's thinking, I'll talk through what I'm thinking, we'll see how it meshes. The main thing that we always talk about is how much high intensity can they sustain, because obviously with cycling you don't have as big of an eccentric loading impact component as you would with land-based sports. So although he says everything is high intensity, it's truly not everything is high intensity, but everything is maximum effort, because you can on a bike and you don't have as long to recover that, because as I say, it's all pushing, right? There's no absorbing or turning over of eccentric energy. So
well, I would argue also that fatigue has less of an impact on the technical execution, or a less disastrous impact, whereas in running, if you're fatigued, you could
I mean,
hurt yourself.
Your pedaling stroke is already outlined for you, right? It's like you just follow the pedals, or you push the pedals in a direction. You can't go lateral. If you do, you're going to fall off the bike. So although there is a cycling efficiency component and a pedaling efficiency component, and trying to put as much force into the pedals at only a portion of the pedal stroke, because between it's like 45 and or it's like 30 and 110 degrees, that's where you produce the most torque and power. So it's a small portion of the pedal stroke where you, like a small window of opportunity to produce force and power every pedal stroke. So everything is kind of almost mapped out for you, and the only thing that you can do when you're fatigued is slow down. People, if you can relax and you can keep pushing on the pedals, nothing's really bad is going to happen to you. You're not going to pull a hamstring or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
I have yet to see it anyway. But yeah, I do have, I would say, a fair bit of input into that program, and I think we've moved some of the programming more towards the eclectic spectrum thing. So whether it's flying or standing efforts, that generally tends to be the gist of it. The overspeed is done by drafting off a motorbike.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense.
So the methodologies aren't really that different to track and field.
Okay.
The big component that you have to play is the gearing that you put on the bike.
Okay.
You know, lighter gears, your higher cadence; bigger gears, lower cadence. And there is an optimal point of cadence in terms of power and torque. It's like 140 to 150 revs per minute.
Okay.
So that gearing is pretty crucial, and you know, obviously bigger gearing is going to be a slower velocity or slower cadence, so that's more like max strength type work. Mm-hmm. Lower cadence would be more overspeed.
Yep.
So the philosophies are quite similar, and the modes of training are quite similar to track and field, which has been good to have that to fall back on and to think about things in that perspective. I think the sport of cycling is very old in its thinking too. Mm-hmm. Like, it takes them a while to accept things, and even though it makes sense, and they don't have a reason for not doing some things, or if they don't have a reason for even doing some things, it takes a while for that shift to occur. And I think that's probably the case with a lot of those types of sports.
Sure.
But yeah, to go back to your question, like I do have input to the track program, and making sure that the gym and the track are meshing together. So, and there's definitely an element of assessment. Like, we're just starting a new cycle now, and we're just seeing what the effects of what's on paper is happening now. We've just finished the first week, and we'll see how it is again next week. And we go into a block of racing now in June. Racing training. So,
what's the next big event?
Next big event is Pan Am Championships.
Okay.
Which was in Mexico, I believe, in September. It's just important in terms of that for points, so it gets you a lot of points for World Championships next year. And the big one that we're pushing towards at the minute is Commonwealths.
Yes, where's that going to be?
Gold Coast.
Oh, nice. That'll be awesome.
So that's we're hoping to have some success there, and that's what we're pushing towards. But we've still got a lot of like cogs in motion in the program, like getting certain people in.
I like your cycling references: cogs in motion, tandem.
Yeah,
this is awesome.
Yep. So yeah, we're still
you're gearing up.
Gearing up.
Yep.
Turning the wheels.
Digging deep with your moral carbon fiber.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So we've got some athletes that we're trying to bring through, and some athletes that we're trying to figure out where their place is in the program.
Okay.
As well.
Okay.
So some political stuff we're working through too.
Yeah.
But yeah, the coaching is always, and the methodology is always an evolving thing. As it never changes, it just evolves.
Okay. Okay. Well, let's we go crush this presentation.
Yep.
But I want to do a follow up. It probably won't be in a car, but we'll do a follow up maybe as you get into the competitive season, the racing season, and leading up to Commonwealth Games. We'll follow up with you and see how things are progressing.
Cool.
Thanks, Brendan.
Thanks, Derek.
I really enjoyed catching up with Brendan again, and seeing how he's evolved as a coach, and touching on some of the key things that he's finding are working, and not being afraid to throw things out if it doesn't work. And I think he has a good relationship with the coaches, as you've heard, and he's working towards something. They have 3 years before they get to the 2020 Olympics, so it's exciting. I think it's pretty exciting to see what kind of impact he can make, and if you ever get a chance to work with individual sports, I think you'll get a lot of value out of it. I mean, in strength and conditioning, a lot of people are focusing on a team sport setting, and it's very tough sometimes to really quantify what kind of impact you're having. And there's obviously some positive aspects of being involved in a team, like a pure team sport, but that doesn't mean you can't get the same sort of benefits of having a team approach in an individual sport, which is also very important. The group dynamic is important. The support people around that group, very important, how they interact. So I'm looking forward to see how Team Canada track cycling does with Brennan involved, and we'll do a follow-up with him once they get into the competitive season, and especially as they gear up for the 2020 Olympics in Tokyo. So thank you very much. Make sure you follow up and provide any feedback you can on Strength Power Speed on Facebook, also on Twitter, where we'll be posting this, and then the video will be on YouTube. So once again, thank you from strengthpowerspeed.com.